Good morning, good afternoon. Today I've got Oladele Dosunmu, who is the co-founder of the Emerging Alkebulan, which is a networking group and a platform, a Pan-Africanist platform. And he's here to provoke thoughts. So we've got that thing. That's a similar trait to us as well, Oladele, I must point out, because the aim of Inuka Africa is also to ignite the African consciousness. And I think the reason for this episode, we're going to tie it in, but we can explore further. Please feel free to raise any other issues, but I wanted to focus mainly within the context of Africa Day that will be on May the 25th. You've seen the video that has got a few Africans.
I see the video,
mentioning what they thought Africa Day represented to them. What are your thoughts on some of those answers, or any answers that stood out for you?
Okay, Africa Day. Before I came on, I did a little bit of research, and the thought process behind the Africa Day was basically the African liberation, when the AU, the African Union, initially started before it became the AU, the OAU before it became the AU, and the aim then was for Africa to have its true liberation, and for Africa to control its affairs, and that's basically what Africa Day stood for, from basically the little research I did. And when we're talking about African Day, is it really worth celebrating Africa today in today's context and basically where Africa is? And I was speaking to a few of my colleagues yesterday, and we can talk about it, but from the conclusion we came up with is the fact that what's there to celebrate?
Indeed.
Because we can celebrate diversity. We can celebrate culture, we can celebrate politics, economics, we can celebrate agriculture, but are we in control?
That is the big question.
So celebrate, pardon?
That is the big question. If I may just come in, because I know you're asking, is there anything to celebrate? Sorry to cut you there, my brother. Do we have anything to celebrate in Africa? As it is right now?
That's my question. Pardon?
What do you think are the obstacles that are stopping us from celebrating anything?
The obstacles for me is when I look at the continent. I'm in Nigeria right now, and I look at the continent. If you want to celebrate anything, there has to be a paradigm. There has to be a parameter to actually gauge the kind of developments we've made, the kind of empowerments that we have within the people. I'm in Nigeria right now, and what I see is basically nothing to write home about. I see poverty everywhere, despite the fact that I say the name of our organization is Alkebulan. Emerging Alkebulan is mother of mankind. We have everything, but at the same time we have nothing. So within that paradigm, I see poverty, I see hopelessness. So if I'm going to gauge celebration has to be based on the fact that the people within the continent are basically fulfilled, empowered, and the resources benefit them that I can't see. So that's the context I'm looking at. That's where I look at things. Because for me, I don't like celebrating things for the sake of celebrating things when the people are not empowered.
Now, someone would come back at that and say, look, Africa has got independence now. All nations are independent in Africa. Therefore, is that burden not on Africans themselves and their leaders? How would you respond to that?
Yeah. How would I respond to that? And I talk about this quite a lot, and I talk about it a lot of times. Africa is independent. We got flag independence, but we haven't got what's the word? We basically, the shackles have come off our necks. but mentally, we're not independent. Because every system that you see on the continent today is the hegemonic system. None of it is African. So when we're talking about independence, like Kwame Nkrumah is a big advocate for this. And he's always saying for us to be independent, we basically need to control our resources by ourselves. I'm Nigerian. I look at the system today. The curriculum is English. The religion is Caucasian. The policies is still the hegemonic policies. Basically, we got an independence in 1960. Until date, my brother, we're still following a colonizer's policies and systems. When we're talking about independence, that basically means that you need to cut the links, the umbilical cord of colonization away from you for you to be completely free. A good example of that right now is Burkina Faso. They're doing that. Mali's doing that. Niger's doing that. The rest of the continent, I'm sorry to say, independent in paper, but in the mind, in reality, we're not independent. Basically, the minority are controlling the continent right now.
If I hear you correctly, you're saying we were given political independence, and our leaders who took over didn't change the operational system, if I can make it that way, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
In other words, they just replaced the colonizer and are like managing what the colonizer left behind. Am I correct in hearing you? That, and if so,
let me give you a good phrase. This is a phrase I normally use. They replaced the white colonizers and they gave us black gatekeepers.
So kind of like white skin, black masks, white skins.
We call them coconuts.
Yeah, Oreos as
yeah.
well. Yeah,
Coconut.
No, I get you. Now, what needs to happen to change that system? Because I'm looking at Africa, it's the youngest continent in the world.
Yeah.
And can this situation that we are in right now be sustained? Because you mentioned that we may, by saying we need to change the paradigm, I suspect you also touched on changing mindsets. If I can just backtrack a bit of that, in order to change mindsets, we've got to know what we're dealing with. And I've had, or I read somewhere where you were involved as well, where you mentioned that Africans, or the African culture, was subverted and perverted. So if we can you explain more about that, in what ways that was done? Because once we understand that, maybe we may start coming up with some form of vision regarding the direction where we should move.
Okay. Basically, the two main challenges we face as Africans right now is religious indoctrination and educational indoctrination. Religious indoctrination in terms of the fact that as Africans, we've embraced culture, heritage that's not ours. And when you lose yourself, you lose your history. And that's where Africans are right now in terms of our religious indoctrination, because basically we don't see value in what's ours. We've been taught, we've been indoctrinated to think that everything that's African is demonic. You know, our cultures, the ways of our ancestors has been deemed to become demonic. That's the one. Number two, education. We talked about education. Education is another problem. Like I said, the curriculum that we follow in Africa is not African. There's nothing Afrocentric about it. Saying that, today we have we celebrated Malcolm X's birthday today, and we have a Afrocentric school in Kenya coming on to help us talk about Malcolm X. So we're talking about education, which is African. To change our mindset, we need to go back to the basics of who we were before they came. It's hard for us to go from the beginning. We can never do that. But there's something about us which is African, I'll say Afrocentric, Afrocentrism, Pan-Africanism. There's a basis for who we were in the days of our ancestors. Basically, my brother, as Africans, the air we breathe, we adored. The water, we glorify the water. Everything around us is basically what makes us Africans. The water, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the land. All these things is basically what Africanness is all about.
Yeah.
These things we've thrown in the garbage bin. Basically, now we've basically adopted civilization from the West, which I call destruction from the West, to disseminate what we as Africans actually are. Basically, the moment we threw away who we are to embrace what they brought to us. But if you look at history, before the Europeans came to Africa, my brother, they had nothing left. Everything was decimated.
Yeah.
They were basically hunter-gatherers who were coming to the West, to Africa. They were scavenging around, looking where they can patch and look for resources. That's how they came to Africa, just in a nutshell. The moment they came to Africa, obviously they saw resources, they saw everything. Once they came in, obviously the destruction to Africa started. So then they told us that everything that's us is basically, it's not great, it's not the best. Now embrace this and throw yourselves away. This is basically the beginning of where we start to get it wrong. How do we change the mindset? It's difficult, my brother, because I talk to people every single day. How do we change the mindset? We need to go back to the basics. Let's embrace our uniqueness as Africans. What makes us unique? We have the melanin in our skin, my brother. We have our songs, our culture, our heritage, everything that defines us. Let's embrace it back. When you truly know who you are as a person and you know your identity, nobody could bamboozle you. But as Africans right now, my brother, we're speaking in English right now. Everything about us, we're not embracing. We're basically throwing ourselves away from it. And that's basically one of the reasons why I'm on the continent right now. I'm going to be on the continent fully. Our work is basically to speak to the minds of people, to start seeing the Africanness in yourselves, to actually know who you are. We have everything we need, including ourselves. I'm sorry to say that. I'm unapologetic about what I'm saying anyway. We don't need the white man to do for us what we can do for ourselves. We have all the capabilities. We have everything we need. Well, the only thing we haven't got is the mindset to believe in ourselves to do what we need to do. My brother, you're in Canada. I'm based in the UK.
Yes.
Look at the diaspora. Look at the wealthy experience that we have. All over, we have all the experience we need. We don't need the white person, Chinese, to do for us. We just got to unite within ourselves. And this journey is not for everybody. It's not for every one of us, because some of us are not. Some of us are the field Negroes, some of the house Negroes. So we need more field Negroes than the house Negroes who are going to do the work.
Yeah. Now,
all this is down to the way we think. It's all about the mindset. We can do anything we set our mind to do if we want to do it. But the challenge is, are we willing to do the work?
That's where I was going to further ask you a question there, because when we talk about mindsets, we have endured, all Africans have endured decades and centuries of colonization. And especially the generations now, we are set in a way of thinking, in some mode of thinking. I always like to refer to it as Africans. As Africans, we are operating in a system that's not ours.
Yeah.
And I don't think, obviously, there's that need of changing mindsets, but I always challenge people to say you need to be in critical consciousness all the time. Now, would you agree that Africans must not be comfortable in thinking that however they are functioning and operating now is good for them? In other words, is a revolutionary mindset necessary all the time for Africans?
Bro, what you just said there is who I am right now. I'm never relaxed, because in my brain, I'm thinking, I can never be comfortable in the system. I basically tell myself the system that I'm operating in is basically not us. Like I said, I'm in Nigeria right now. Okay, I had a meeting with a brother. We have genetically modified seeds in Africa right now, being pushed onto Africa right now. And I can never be comfortable. The fact that I know that the food we eat is being compromised. I see people around there looking, you know, I speak to students in schools. I'm speaking to one of the daughters in the house I'm living in right now. She was telling me she works as an intern for a company, research company in Nigeria. And her research is funded by a US company in Nigeria. And what are they doing? They're finding ways to genetically modify our seeds and garlic bulbs. This is basically in Nigeria right now as I'm speaking to you. So knowing all these things and knowing where I come from Europe, as African, if you try to be comforted in the system, you're never going to see the evils of the system. And when you awaken to the fact that this system is basically not benefiting my people, and it's not just about individuals, it's about the collective. When you see that the system is not benefiting the majority, because don't forget, like I said, the gatekeepers, some of them are comfortable because the capitalist system is going to benefit a few, but it will never benefit everybody. And as long as it benefits the minority over the majority, we can't be comfortable. So I'm cognizant all the time. I'm constantly thinking, oh, how can we change this? How can I speak to people? How can I network? That's how I met somebody like you. That's how we met. How can we find each other? Like-minded people who can start thinking the same way. So let's build a network of people together to find solutions. And we can do this if we find each other. So I can say to you, I cannot relax knowing that there's work that needs to be done. I can't switch off. I don't know how to switch off.
Yeah. Yeah, which brings us back right to Africa Day, as you're saying, in terms of mindset and being fully aware of our circumstances.
Yeah.
How important is unity to start off with? And is the African Union achieving that unity, do you think?
I was writing some notes before I came onto this broadcast, my brother. And in my notes, I wrote down that the OAU, now the AU, takes 70% of its funds from external sources. 70%.
That's a problem already.
If your colonizers fund the organization, who calls the shot? So when we're talking about this is African Union, we're talking about African Day.
Yeah.
How can you celebrate a day that's controlled by the detractors and the colonizers, my brother? I find it difficult to do that. So we can celebrate the day to let people know the challenges we're facing. And you're talking about unity. Unity is the key. Diasporans, and you can see my website, this is what I talk about a lot. And I talk about this all. I talk about Ubuntu, Agbajowo. I am because you are because I am. This journey is not for everybody. Because some people are comfortable where they are, and whatever me and you say, they're not going to see what we're saying. They're just going to be thinking, I'm wasting my time. I've had this conversation with somebody in a group chat today. So, you know, you can't change nothing. I don't believe that we can't do nothing. You know, all we have to do is sow a seed. We can do a lot by sowing a seed, and it's about the mindset and uniting in purpose on a common ground. We can do those things. So, and this is what I see. So, doing what I do, it's not fruitless because I might not see the rewards today, but I've got grandkids now. They would reap the rewards of what we're doing. We have to sow the seed. We have to basically get to the consciousness of people and thinking, no, we have to work together. Us not working together as Africans is basically beneficial to the ones who want to keep us united. Yeah. Our disunity favors them.
Yeah.
So Africans need to realize that we're fighting each other. We're fighting each other, detrimental. But guess what? Those who want to see us divided are so happy that we're fighting.
You mentioned
because
something.
They can actually infiltrate.
You mentioned something interesting there, Ubuntu.
Yes.
Now, would you link that as a starting point of changing mindsets? Because I'm
That's the
thinking
key.
here, what is Ubuntu? If you can just let our viewers understand what
Okay,
Ubuntu
what is
is.
Ubuntu?
And
In my language,
yeah.
it means Bajawa, Lafinsoya. Basically, it's the same thing. I'm sure in your language you have the similar. Ubuntu is South African. I am because you are.
Yes.
You are because I am. In the days of my ancestors, my brother, we lacked nothing. We lacked nothing. We had everything we needed. We fed off the land. We protected the land. We engaged with each other. We lacked nothing. The disengagement came when we embraced systems that were not us. And they say Africa is not developed. Africa was developing. The kind of development that we had in those days, even the Caucasians in the infinite wisdom can never match what we did in the past. They're trying, but they can never match it. And we did those things because we're in sync with nature. We were one with nature. You know, there was no patriarchal or matriarchal. There was a balance. And we're able to achieve all those things because we're one with nature. And this is what Ubuntu means, my brother. Ubuntu is being one with nature, making sure that your brother or your sister lacks nothing. In today's society, we are individualistic, ostentatious. Basically, we're chasing after all the trinkets that the West has thrown at us, thinking once you obtain these things, then you've arrived, you've achieved, you've obtained, making you forget the people in the villages who are still on the survival mode. Ubuntu is about bringing ourselves together, forgetting about, collective, communal, working together, but that's basically Ubuntu. That's what we need to do. This is what we as Africans, this is basically where we lost ourselves.
Yeah.
This is what we used to be. This is what we were. When we had everything, this is how we lived.
So
we've moved ourselves away from that, to become capitalist in our way of thinking.
Now,
cutthroats.
So, in other words, we've been deprived of our identity, if I understand you correctly. The African has lost his identity and therefore cannot find himself and is acting confused. Is that correct?
That's exactly where we are right now.
And you also mentioned trinkets being thrown at us. And the word capitalism, you also mentioned it. Would I be correct in saying that therefore Ubuntu is at loggerheads with capitalism? Ubuntu and capitalism are not compatible. Would I be correct in saying that?
They're not compatible, my brother, because Ubuntu means communal collective empowerment, working together as a body of people, doing things together, making sure that people around you are on the same level. So there's no one person, there's no one-eyed king in the midst of the blind, which is what capitalism does. So basically, you build collectively together. And brother, when everybody's at a particular level of fulfillment, that spreads. That means everybody's fine. Yes. It's what I'm saying sounds like it's not feasible, it's not doable, but it's something that where we are right now, it's something that we need to start embracing and start thinking. In order for us to get it, because we can't use, like you said, use the word operating system. Yes. As long as we keep using the Western operating system as Africans, we're never going to achieve anything in terms of self-sustaining ourselves, because everything that is us, basically our seeds are controlled, politics controlled, education is controlled, economics controlled, spirituality is controlled.
Yes. Yes.
So how can you be yourself?
So if I understand you correctly, you would advocate for the values of Ubuntu as the starting point to change mindsets, going back to those values. Would that be the starting point to change mindsets and achieving the unity that Africans are looking for?
My brother, there's no other way, because I've been on this journey for quite a while now, and I've looked at every other solution. I've studied, read books, and I look at everything. And in my consciousness, I cannot get away from that, because collective consciousness, collective building, collective empowerment is what basically the foundation of Africa. We cannot go back to where we were, but there is the remnants of that we still have, that we can actually bring back.
Yes. Yes.
And do something with it. there's a framework there that we have. We don't, you know, we have the framework there. All we have to just trigger our minds to think, you know what, let's stop being individualistic about what we do. You know, we have an organization, my brother. I don't know how many collaborations we're doing, but we're collaborating with so many people. I keep finding them every single day. We are there. If you're looking, you'll find. But if you're basically selfish and self-centered in your ways, you're not going to find them. You're not going to see those people. As you reach out to me, other people are reaching out to me. So within those cliques of community building together, we find each other, and you can see you're doing something, I'm doing something, and then we keep building a circle of people with similar interests at the same goal, which is basically the empowerment of Africans. And that's the way forward. I can't see anything beyond that.
So if Africans go back to the values of Ubuntu as the starting framework of decolonization, would that, and I think we would agree that that would be the starting point of some kind of changing the paradigm, the mindset, the current mindset that has made us lose our identity. Because you alluded to the fact that we still have an attachment, what you call the umbilical cord, with former colonizers. So their systems are still embedded in us, and they're still extracting our wealth and natural resources.
Yep.
But in losing our identity, some have said, and I'm thinking of a psychologist who said we may have been affected psychologically in terms of generational trauma from colonization. How do we deal with that aspect? Because in losing our identity and the savagery that we experienced, whether through slavery or colonization, how do we heal from that? Because there's some healing that's required as well.
How do we heal from that?
Yeah.
The way forward in terms of, for me, one of the things we're doing is basically getting to the young minds. Getting to the young minds, because the young minds are the best lot to get to first. My age, your age, a lot of us are far gone.
Yeah.
I was on TikTok live yesterday, and we're having this conversation, and the best starting point for us right now is to get to the young minds. And that's why we are advocating that we have start having Afrocentric curriculum. We need this Afrocentric curriculum in Africa. We need to throw away the Eurocentric curriculum, basically, which basically tells us, which makes us repeat their value system, which is destroying us. We need our own Afrocentric curriculum. That means ripping apart the Eurocentricity in African schools. We have schools who are doing that right now. Basically, I love that school, and we're going to find ways to partner with them to actually get these curriculums all over Africa if we have to. But let's get to the kids first. Once we start nurturing the kids, then we build from there. Yeah. And also, those who are in the system already, it's not too late for some people, because it was never too late for me. It's never too late for you. So we're going to find those ones who are curious, who are, inquisitive in terms of things are not working. What did we get it wrong? We're going to reach out to a few people along the way who are going to join us. Yeah. But the key for me is to say, let's start with the kids. That's a foundation point. They haven't got the trauma that most of us had. So we can't afford to pass that trauma to them. So let's give them the identity, a strong foundation, a strong identity that's going to, make them strong and have a solid foundation to moving forward.
Now, given the backdrop of what we've been discussing up to now, I'm coming back to the African Union, because they profess unity among Africans, and they've proposed programs, whether they're economic, etc. And there's the famous one, Agenda 2063, which they think which they say and profess will change Africa's condition. Do you think Agenda 2063, given what we've said, will change Africa's condition?
Agenda 2063 would change if it's imbibed in Ubuntu.
Mm.
If it's not imbibed in Ubuntu, it will never work. And what saying again, what does Ubuntu mean? Collective communal empowerment.
Yeah. And
if that's not there, it's just a waste of time. I'm sorry to say.
Do you think currently
it's just a waste of time?
Do you think currently it's based on that? That's the foundation?
No, this agenda started in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
We're in 2024 now, about 11 years into it. And I cannot see much change in Nigeria right now, my brother. I can't see it, because this is the thing. We are so good at putting things to paper, having these policies. But when it comes to implementation, African leaders are found wanting. They're found wanting because they're gatekeepers for the hegemonic system. They're basically the front for the colonizers. So if you're a gatekeeper for the system that funds you, that actually props you up, how are you sincerely going to follow a system you put in place? They put it there, it looks good on paper. Yeah. But in reality, are they ready to actually make the sacrifice to implement these policies in Ubuntu? Yeah. My answer to that is no. Pardon?
You say our leaders are gatekeepers.
They're gatekeepers for the colonizer systems, my brother. Because basically, if you're not a gatekeeper, a system does not serve you, you should destroy it. Within your infinite wisdom, within your clique, you can easily do that. Let's build something different. Let's have a Afrocentric policy system that's going to work for the collective empowerment Africans. We Africans can do that. Our leaders can do that if they want to, because the system benefits them. They get their money abroad. They have their flights and all that kind of stuff. They're 1%. They're comfortable with that, and that's basically what the system has made them individualistic, ostentatious, greedy, the corrupt. And that all these things were built into the system anyway, because the people who put the system in place knew exactly what they were doing. Yeah. So 2063 will work if we're serious to make it work. Yeah. If we have the intention to make it work. But with what I'm seeing right now, I can't. There's no implementation. There's nothing in place.
So right now it's a waste of time, even if they implement regional economic integration, and they say Africans can travel without passports. That's
yes. Why do we need passports, my brother? Why do we need passports in Africa? And these are the borders. These are psychological borders that we have as well. A foreigner will come into Africa. It's easy for them to actually come from France, England, to come to South Africa, Nigeria. But you are Nigeria. I'm a Nigerian. I want to go to South Africa. I have to, you can't even get direct flights to South Africa. You have to go stop over here and there. Why? And as African leaders, why are we not taking the barriers down? If we're serious about all these policies and want to implement the right thing, why do we have to follow? My brother, these systems have been there since the 1960s. Yeah. We're in 2024, and our leaders, in their own, I don't know what to call them, but they have not done nothing to change that. They're comfortable the way it is, which makes the white people comfortable because they know that they have gatekeepers in place that are going to keep doing and propping them up. Yeah. Sorry, look at Bram Traore there, for example. Arikana Chiombore Kwa went to Burkina Faso. She brought diasporans back home. I heard this guy speak, and he's speaking, he's implementing, he's doing. He's actually bringing diasporans back home to come help. These are the things that we need to do. But if you look at most African countries, none of us are doing that. Even somebody like me, I'm in Nigeria. When I start implementing what I'm going to do, I want to start doing. I know I'm going to come against a lot of backlash. A lot of people are going to want to fight me because I'm trying to change the mindset of people. I know it's going to be hard. Yeah. Interestingly, you mentioned Burkina Faso, and that kind of brings me to what has happened in West Africa, in Mali and Niger, etc., and the political change that happened in, was it Senegal? Yeah. Yeah. If we look at those,
would you say that's the right start? They're doing the correct thing in terms of freeing Africans from neocolonialism?
Yeah. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are doing the right thing. Senegal, I'm waiting to see what they're doing. We are observing what they're doing. But in terms of those three countries, what they said is they've looked at the French people in the face and say, well, sod it. We don't care what you do. We're going to go our own way. More African countries need to start doing that. If more Africans start doing that, then basically they will have the support, because my brother, the youth, and we're talking about the youth as well, the youth are frustrated, really, really frustrated in terms of, because why would you have everything and you want to run away from a continent that's blessed to places where they merely tolerate you? Make that make sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of Burkina Faso, Mali, Traore is only 36 years old. He's basically, and the good thing is he has a legacy of Thomas Sankara to look up to.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we have that. Most African countries haven't got that kind of legacy because we haven't done anything. We haven't had a revolutionary leader that can do something similar. But obviously, we're all embracing the Thomas Sankara spirit, because I am. I'm embracing the Patrice Lumumba spirit, Kwame Nkrumah spirit, because these guys are Pan-African.
Yeah.
And we have that, we need that Pan-African spirit that's going to, let's look inwards, Africa for Africans. I'm unapologetically Pan-African, my brother. That's who we are. Let's look inwards first. Let's use those guys, because some people will say, okay, it came in through the military. It's all about the intentions, my brother. If you have the right intentions, do the right thing. Like Malcolm X says, whatever means necessary.
Yeah, yeah.
Which Malcolm X said.
Which is an interesting point, isn't it? Because the African Union has got this thing of not recognizing anyone who comes into power through what they call a coup. And now we've seen what has happened in West Africa, and we've seen those countries that we mentioned getting out of the African Union, which is a slap in the face of the unity, which is a slap in the face of the unity that we've been talking about. Is the African Union in a dilemma here, that these three countries have dropped out of the African Union?
The African Union basically, like I said, it's compromised. So for me personally, I don't give a damn what the AU cares. I don't care what they think, because even that organization needs to be disrupted as well, because basically it's not serving the interest of Africans at all. It's not serving the interest. So African Union doesn't serve a purpose. Founding fathers, Kwame Nkrumah, and those who set it up had the right intentions, but it's since been hijacked. So in terms of what it stands for, what it's doing, so I'd rather see a radical change, a revolutionary change away from that. So if it takes three countries to break away from it and others follow, so be it. Because you cannot, my brother, we're having this conversation. How can you expect a system that's funded 70% by foreigners? Speak for us.
It
doesn't make sense. So what do they stand for? If your colonizers are funding you, it's not speaking for me.
If I hear you correctly, then what has happened in West Africa is revolutionary change. And I saw a video where Thabo Mbeki was also saying that the African Union is in a dilemma here. We saw initially how ECOWAS wanted to move in and reverse whatever those guys were implementing, but something kind of drew them back, and Ruto as well.
My country, Nigeria, basically was one of those countries who were putting pressure on Niger to reverse the trend. Even the US funded Nigeria, sent Nigeria to go to Niger to tell them to reverse the coup and all that kind of stuff. The audacity to use my country, Nigeria, as a prop, for a mouthpiece for their agenda.
would that be an indication of the compromise of most African leaders then that you were talking about?
Of course it is.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
we're
of course
acting
it
for
is.
the
How
hegemony.
dare they?
Yeah.
Yeah, how dare they tell Nigerians to go tell Niger or Burkina Faso money to reverse those decisions because it doesn't suit the paymasters, doesn't suit the hegemonic powers. How dare they?
Yeah, I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people are not aware or were not aware of the situation that these countries were in terms of their relationship with France. I don't know if you could just give a brief background on that. What kind of relationship they had?
France right now, France and these 13 or 14 African countries, they have a kind of assimilative kind of policy, and basically they take out $500 billion from these countries annually. Annually, that's a lot of money. It's telling me that these countries are poor, but they pay their colonizers $500 billion every year.
And they've got the natural resources.
So basically, they get first refusal for any resources, uranium, everything. Look at the hoo-ha was about Niger, because they had a pipeline running from Nigeria through Niger to Europe. When the coup happened, they were worried about it's going to affect the pipeline because of the resources they're going to get from it. So all these interests, all the interest is basically not about us. So with the French countries, basically they control the economy. They got the C francs, which basically they control. They can't print their own money. They have, make this make sense, my brother. In Europe, they use the euros, yeah?
Yeah.
So in Africa, we have the C franc, which is basically a special currency that was developed for the African countries.
Yeah.
They're using something completely different. And this is the kind of situation where France basically controls. The France colonization is actually worse than the Brits, because at least the Brits, their grips are off a little bit. I know they're still there, but France basically controls everything. And this is what Burkina Faso is saying. Guys, how dare you? No, yeah. you gave us so-called independence, but you still control our economies. You control our education because they speak French. They control the policies. They have military bases on these places.
That's the other thing. Sorry to kind of distract you here. You mentioned military bases on the continent as well. Why have foreign bases on the continent? Why? What is the rationale behind
that? My brother, you can answer that question. To protect that, America would say to protect its national interests. That's what America says whenever they go. That's a foreign policy, to protect the national interest. When it comes to American national interest, they don't take it lightly. They will do anything to protect it. And the national interest, what is it? It's basically Africa's resources. The audacity.
Yeah. And
so they have the bases there.
Terrorism is also mentioned as a factor, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a factor, but who funds the terrorism? In my country, Nigeria, right now, we have Boko Haram.
Yeah.
Boko Haram are mercenaries paid for by the West. Basically, for us to fight each other, for us to get distracted, be fearful, so they can actually go to those places, push the people off the land, put them in the IDP camps, and then they come in and take the resources away. It's happening right now. I had a professor talk to me about this. We had a video. We were going to shoot a video about this, and he's going to talk about it. I'll send the video to you when we're done.
Yeah.
Just listen to what he's saying.
That, yeah.
And all these things are basically put in place as distractions for them to keep infiltrating the system so they can take control of the resources. And this is my frustration with African leaders. And I do not trust the African leaders anymore. I think if there's going to be any change, it's down to the people. And most importantly, the youth, to actually awaken the spirit of the mindset of the youth, the question of the youth. Because the youth are ready to do something. It's just they're looking for the right leadership and the people to get behind to do it. Because I've spoken to quite a few, and I do my TikTok live every so often, and I can hear them talking. I can hear the yearning. I can hear them cry.
Yes.
But they're just looking for people to trust.
And I think this also brings us to the question of Libya. What happened in Libya? That exposed Africa's weakness as well. That African countries were told not to fly over Africa because
Yes.
NATO
Imagine.
was. In any case, I understand your point, and there's also conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's obvious that conflict is about resources.
Which is there to. It's been since 1993? I can't remember what year. 1999. It's been over 30 years now. That's been going on. It didn't start with 30 since 30 years ago. It started with Patrice Lumumba.
Yes.
Initially, that's where it started, and obviously, they have to put their own gatekeeper in charge. Obviously, when the DRC had the independence, Patrice Lumumba was a revolutionary. Yes. He basically wanted Africa, the Congos, basically to control their own resources. Obviously, the Belgians were not happy with that. The Americans were not happy with that. They had to get rid of him. They had to bring in Mobutu Sese Seko, who was there for 30 years, who was one of their keepers, who kept things in check. And basically, you can see, if it doesn't work for them, they will kill, destroy, infiltrate, CIA go in there, mess it all up, take control. They have to put their own stooge in these countries. DRC today, I don't know how many estimated between 10 to 50 million people displaced, because I post about this all the time. And obviously, what for? For the stuff that we need for the gadgets. And Congo is basically one of the biggest disasters in the world today, which nobody's talking about. When we're talking about African unity, you're talking about Libya, we're talking about DRC. Yes. What are African leaders doing to get rid of that situation? Nothing.
Well, the African Union hasn't, I don't think the Congo is on their agenda as such. There have been individual country efforts, because I know South Africa sent a military there. I don't know to what end to help with that. But do you think it's also an intra-African conflict there, or is it the gatekeepers, what you say are the gatekeepers being used by the West again in different countries?
My brother, it's always been the case. They're always going to find one of us to work against us. That's always the case. It's the case when the colonization started. It's always one of us working against us. There's always going to be, yes, master, yes, master. I mean, the house Negroes against the field Negroes. There's always going to be loads of house Negroes. And they've got house Negroes. Like Rwanda, Uganda, they're working, they're neighbors to the DRC. There's conflict going on. Why are they not dealing with it? It's convenient for them not to deal with it because they benefit, and that's the key. They are benefiting from the misery of their own fellow Africans.
But you mentioned,
and that's disaster.
You mentioned Uganda and Rwanda. Their leaders, in some ways, come across as Pan-African in terms of their language and their speeches.
They come across as, and this is the thing about even Ruto, come across as Pan-African. But when it comes to the policies and implementation and what they're doing on the ground, it doesn't come across, because how can you, as a Pan-African, absolutely as an African, see over 15 million people killed in a neighboring country next door, and you don't seem fit that you need, as an African brother, to do something about it, to bring it to an end? Why don't we sit down, talk to ourselves, find resolutions? Let's break it down. Because my brother, you can always find a solution if you're willing to sit down with people and talk about these things. But they're not willing to do that, because the people behind them, the hegemonic powers, will not allow them to do that. So these leaders are propped up as well. They're in place because they're allowed to be there. So otherwise they won't be there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in terms of the change that we require, you mentioned education, religion, and I think which are all tied to the mindset. And I think the type of mindset that you seem to say we must move towards is a revolutionary mindset until things change. Would you say it's a revolutionary mindset, or would you describe it in a different way?
People have asked me this before. If you want to term it as a revolutionary, so be it. But it has to be a 360 degrees turnaround, because we need to reverse where we are to get to where we need to get to. And where we are right now as a system is not working. So basically, there needs to be a paradigm. There needs to be a light bulb moment that's going to make it, you know what? What we've been doing for the last 50, 60 years is not change, it's not working. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
We need to get to that realization that we need to actually do something completely different to get to where we need to get to. Because as long as we keep following the system that we're in right now, we've had this system in place for the last 100, 200 years. My brother, if you look at Africa today, it's getting worse.
Yeah. Now
we have all these.
You can keep. Now we're being led by the African Union. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
How can the African Union be changed? How can change that within the African Union?
That's a tough one, man. Let me throw that question back to you. How do you think the African Union can be changed from your perspective? Let's start from your opinion. I'm asking you.
Are there no revolutionary countries within the African Union? I'll give you an example. I think the African Union doesn't have an agenda that's Afrocentric and that tries to reverse or break away from the hegemon. If I can bring an incident to you, there was an instance where I think, I don't know whether it was the chairman or whoever of the African Union invited Israel as an observer to the Union. I don't know if you remember that incident.
Yeah,
and South Africa and Algeria protested.
Yes.
And the observer ended up. So I think in some way, there are some countries that are thinking along the proper lines, and there are countries that are not. But I think the majority, as you said, the union may be compromised. And this is reflected with Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali being out of the African Union. And what does that say about the unity that Africa Day seeks to celebrate? Having said that, I don't know if you're also aware that Africa Day is a public holiday in maybe 5 countries on the whole continent.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. It's just 4 or 5 days. That's it.
What do you want to say on that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. My sister, Mama Kanishile, actually talked about this because she was on our podcast and she talked about that.
Yeah.
So that basically tells you how messed up we are. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
You know, imagine just 4 or 5 days. 4 or 5 days just celebrating Africa Day. So basically, on our itinerary, we don't value ourselves, and that's detrimental to basically our identity and who we are. And we saying that something we had in mind, because what we were thinking of doing is actually have a transatlantic slave trade day. You know, like the Jews celebrate Holocaust every single day, without fail. In your faith, they're celebrating the Holocaust. Africans never celebrate or remember is the word I'm using. Never remember the transatlantic slave trade, the Saharan slave trade. We never talk about it. If we put these things in the public domain and talk about these things, it awakens our consciousness to make us understand, oh yeah, this is the evil that happened to us. And these things are so subtle in terms of the way we think, because even with the Holocaust, you will never forget the fact that Holocaust happened.
Yes, yes.
So as Africans, we should not, any date that's basically affected us in the past should not be forgotten, because it helps us navigate the way forward, knowing what we've gone through before we got here. So we're talking about African Day. African Union, Africa, we should be in the forefront of a remembrance day for the transatlantic slave trade, they should be pushing this, remembering every single year, but they're nowhere to be found. And this is basically, my brother, this is basically we need to bring this up. I'm actually, my guys, we're talking about this.
Yeah, this is an interesting dimension that you're going towards, because it kind of brings me back to Africa Day and how it should be celebrated, right?
Yes.
You advocating for, okay, it's Africa Day. The way we should celebrate it is remember all these things. Now, you mentioned the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
That was what was behind the transatlantic slave trade? Capitalism.
Capitalism, yes, that's it. It's basically they came for what they wanted.
What is behind colonialism?
Capitalism.
Right? So if you look at all the systems of oppression, what's behind, what's the driving force?
It's capitalism.
So I think in terms of the unity and the celebration of the Day Africa Day, I think you bring a very valid point here in terms of you mentioned that we should revisit and remind our young people who may not have that history of all these ills and evils that have been, and all the wars that we're currently having, you can trace capitalism in it. And if I can ask you in terms of the transatlantic slave trade, would you be in a position to kind of mention the actors? Because I've read somewhere that the church was also involved in pushing that forward and in granting the
Okay.
bull. Do you have an idea?
The transatlantic slave trade, in terms of, because I'm not an expert in this, but obviously we've done a little research here and there, and you trying to understand exactly what it is. And in terms of it, basically, who was behind it? It's basically the Romans, the Greeks, the Pope, the Church. The first ship that docked to Africa was basically. So, if you look, there's a film on Netflix right now called Ijinga.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watched it. It's basically African woman warrior.
Yeah.
And you see the Portuguese in there, and basically, they were praying to a so-called Christ to do evil to people. So you can see in terms of the slave trade is basically perverted in terms of those behind it. And it's, like we said initially, bro, it's just about the fact that the intentions were not right. They just basically put it in place. That's why I say, for me, I say religion is indoctrination, education is indoctrination. All these things serve a purpose of infiltration for them to be able to take what they need. So they don't serve our purpose at all. So transatlantic slave trade, as you know what happened to our people, because there's a dungeon in Nigeria here.
Yes.
They put people in shackles. On top of the dungeon, they had a church where they prayed to people.
Yes.
Before they shipped them on the boats.
Yeah.
So what kind of religion is that? That's basically complicit to destruct. And the same religion will tell you that that should not kill, that should not steal, that should not destroy, that should not do all these things. And the same religion is basically doing the complete opposite of what you say you shouldn't do. So transatlantic slave.
Yeah. Carry on. Sorry to cut.
Yeah. So the slave trade basically was just a tool to basically, I'll say the word, still destroy, and it basically, still and destroy Africans basically. So yeah. And we're talking about trauma earlier.
Yeah.
The people in America today are still going through that trauma today. Okay. I'm lucky. You're a diasporan. I'm a diasporan. Obviously, I've got links to back home, so I'm not so affected. But I know in my network of people, there are African American brothers who would do anything to go back to Africa, to get on that soil. I've seen so many who want to come back home and just be part of this, to be just to feel the soil of the forefathers. So the trauma is huge, and these are the things that we're working toward. That's what our group's about. Is basically bringing people together to find these little puzzles to make these things reversible. Just heal the trauma of people. Yeah,
my brother, we'll be winding up because I know you've got another commitment. But you mentioned religion, education. Now, we've been taught for centuries to think and behave in a certain way that's been passed down generations. And this thing is so deep-rooted in us, it's difficult. It's difficult to go to people and say, the way you function and think is not beneficial for you. What do you think needs to be done to change that mindset? We spoke about mindset earlier on.
Bro, I am in this journey right now. On my LinkedIn page about 3 or 4 days ago, I got attacked because I do. If you go on my page, I talk about these things a lot, and I don't relent. I talk about it. And in Nigeria right now, I'm talking to people about the impact of religion. Like you said, it's a generational thing. How do we change it? It's not easy because people are going to attack you. People are ready to fight you to defend the white God, even though it has no bearings on their lives. People will attack you. I've seen people attack me for it. It's not an easy task, but what I'll say is when you know the truth will set you free. And personally, knowing what I know, and obviously you're on the same journey as I am, we just have to keep chipping away and talking to people. Basically, create the awareness, set up groups, set youth centers, whatever we can, because there's so many things we can do. Yeah. So it's about setting all these centers up, getting people, and that's what we do on our platform right now. That's why I bring on people who can talk about this. I'm not an expert, so I'll bring on people who can talk about, who've had 30, 40, 50 years of history, who've studied these things, to come and talk about it. And by doing that, what he's doing is it's basically, and I can see the feedback from people saying, I never knew this. Yeah. So creating that awareness, creating programs where we can actually talk about these topics. Yeah. When it comes to religion, you're cutting off there. Means, oh yeah. So can you hear me? You had cut off. You can restate your point. Hello. You can restate your point. I can hear you now. You're talking about religion. Yeah. So what I was trying to explain is when it comes to religion, so when it comes to religion, people say don't touch it because it's a sensitive topic. Yes. And I'm saying to you, if it's a sensitive topic to you, that means we need to talk about it. Because why can't you talk about it? Any topic we should be able to discuss without you feeling intimidated and scared about talking about something. If you're so sure about what you believe in, let's talk about it. So we dig in, we talk about it. And as we've said on this, religion is one of the biggest impediments to the African mindset change shift. Religion is one of the biggest cankerworms that's holding us back. So personally, I'm dogged, dogmatic. I'm not shifting away from that. I'm going to keep talking about it. And we're going to keep bringing people. We're going to keep talking about it. And we're going to keep hammering it home. Yeah. We can chip away to people. And we talk logically. You make a valid point because... when we talk logically, you make a valid point because I think education and religion was instrumental in terms of changing the African's identity because it attacked the African's culture and spirituality. Yeah. And once those two are attacked, I think you lose your identity. And there's also a writer and an activist, revolutionary. And a revolutionary who was involved in Nigeria, Frantz Fanon, who said colonialism is not just a political and economic exploitation, but also psychological warfare that devastates the mental health of the colonized. And this is where I was coming from in terms of solutions, taking all that into perspective. What would you say are the main takeaways? What are the solutions? Just to summarize them in ending lesson. Yeah, to summarize it, we are our own solutions, and to find the solution, basically we have to look at what's not working, flip it on the head, and basically be critical about what we're doing. Solutions basically is education. We need to educate ourselves because the education that we've received is not working. It basically makes us more white than black. So we need to flip the education on its head. In terms of religion, we need to start embracing our own culture, our own heritage. Our fathers, our grandfathers, our forefathers, our ancestors had their ways that worked for us for centuries before our history got perverted. We need to go back to that. The curriculums in our schools needs to be changed. The government, which basically it still embraces colonial past, needs to be changed. But the first thing is the way we think. if we can deal with the way we think, and if Africans realize that the white man is not their friend. Because if Africans knew their history, and knew all the atrocities that have been happened against them, if they see a white man on the street today, they wouldn't even let them be here. But because our mind has been so messed up to the fact that we still see the white man as the white savior syndrome, it's still in our heads, because obviously a lot of people still have the white Jesus in their homes. And they've done a great job on our minds, my brother, man. They've done a great job on us.
Yeah.
So if we can just get that, get people to understand that. And this is what I say to people every time I speak to people. If you knew what they did to you and how they perverted your history and how they destroy your mindset, and you know what they did, if you see them today, you would not even let their little feet land on the continent of Africa. I know it's hard to get there, but we need to chip away gradually. Yeah. You're doing what you're doing. I'm doing what I'm doing. There's a lot of us globally who are doing this work. And thankfully, right now, my brother, there's an awakening going on.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's an awakening going on around amongst the conscious Alkebulan people. It's happening right now. It might be slow, but it's happening. But as long as we keep finding each other and we have the same message, and when all of us keep saying the same message, sooner or later, people will be forced to start listening. Our YouTube channel, since Professor Small came on, Mama Kanshile came on, we put a little clips here and there, and before you know it, it's blowing, because people are curious. What are these people saying? We never heard this before. So we have these tools that we're using, which is the tools of the oppressor, but we can actually use it to our own advantage, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And lastly, could you now summarize again how we can celebrate Africa Day, and those countries that don't recognize it as a public holiday, should they?
We need to celebrate Africa Day. And like I said, I think the best way to celebrate African Day is to recognize the transatlantic slave trade needs to be recognized through African Day. I think that would be a starting point. And then I think that would be a rallying point, a rallying call behind countries, because everybody can actually relate to that. And then obviously the African Day is about making sure that the injustices that happened in the past doesn't happen again, that we're independent in terms of controlling our own paradigm. That can be a rallying call to actually put those things together. Because when you know your history and you know what stopped you or got you to where you are, it triggers your mind to think, you know what, this happened for this reason. How do we change it? Because not celebrating that and not having that consciousness, basically, we forget about it. And like I said, the Holocaust never gets forgotten. So African Day, about the transatlantic slave trade, the trans-Saharan slave, if you want to bring that into it, because all these things happen for a reason. Let's bring it together. Let's remember those days. And when we remember those days, it could be the trigger point to the emancipation of the minds of African people, African brothers and sisters.
And of course, colonialism as well. You can't leave that out.
Yeah, we can't leave it. Don't forget, they're all interlinked. So.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Oladele Dosunmu from the Emerging Alkebulan. After our initial technical issues, we managed to have some form of discussion. And I'm sure some of the topics we could go into detail in and more depth. But I think
we can do that, bro. We are gonna have time. We can prepare ourselves, get ready. We can do that, because I don't mind. We can just have a topic, we can discuss it, and we can dissect it. And yeah, we could have gone on and on, but I know you've got other commitments. Thank you for your time. Yeah, I've got another one coming in the next 40 minutes. So,
yeah, thank you for your time, and have a great Sunday, and all the best in your next session. Man.
Thank you, my brother.
Okay.
Yeah, well done. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my brother. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Cheers.